So, welcome from our house to your house. How are we travelling? I know there are a range of answers to that question. Some of you are deeply secure in the knowledge that the worst that can happen is that you die and go to be with Jesus. Others, already over the novelty of Zoom and would kill for a hug. These are tough times and will get tougher before they get better. So we need something that speaks faith and hope and love deep into our spirits, not trite sayings, but deep truths. And Isaiah has been and continues to provide that for us. The first chapters of Isaiah track the unravelling of the rebellious children of God. It's like a current affairs or a 7:30 report expose. An expose of rebellious ratbag children who are rebelling against their Father God. An expose of lives so full of treasure and idols that there's no room for provider God. An expose of a carefully planted vineyard that produces sour grapes in the vineyard of God. The vine keeper came looking for justice and he found bloodshed. He came looking for righteousness, but he hears cries of distress, we read in chapter 5 verse 7. So God is going to do the unthinkable. Actually, he's going to do exactly what he told his people he would do. Trust and obedience would lead to the blessing of his presence, his provision and his protection. Misplaced trust and disobedience will lead to the removal of the blessing of his presence and his provision and his protection. Rather than knowing his presence in blessing and favour, they'll know his presence like a refining fire. Emmanuel, God with us, is either the safest place to be or the scariest place to be. Well, unlike us, Isaiah's generation weren't facing a worldwide pandemic, but they were facing a massive, brutal army that was swallowing the ancient Near East. The Assyrians would pick one city as their demonstration city. They'd then decimate the place, they'd abuse the living and the dead, and they'd leave only a trail of blood and death. And then they'd talk to the surrounding cities and negotiate a surrender. By the time we reach chapter 11, we can imagine that vicious army at the gates of Jerusalem, lapping up against the wall of the city. Or to pick up the imagery of chapter 10, a huge axe has levelled the forest, every tree felled, only blackened stumps remain. Sue and I spent some time in Tassie during the bushfires earlier this year. Timber plantations are still a significant industry in Tasmania, so every now and then in this most beautiful part of Australia you come across a hillside that has been completely levelled, so barely a stump or two remain. Well, that's the image that we're left with at the end of Isaiah 10. God has a track record of levelling things to make way for regrowth and renewal. That's the historical background of Isaiah 11, and again we find ourselves thankful to have this vantage place to understand our moment in history. If Isaiah 11 was written to help Isaiah's generation survive and thrive in their situation, then it can do the same for us this side of the birth of the Prince of Peace. Well, John Murray is now going to read Isaiah 11 to us.